Large is the Smallest We've Got, a jigsaw puzzle by Jed Hamilton. The Gardening Angel. They went up to Madison's apartment where Scott was staying until he and all of them had worked out what he was going to do and where he was going to do it. He was asleep in the spare room when Chloe tiptoed in and took a peep at him, opening and closing the door as you would on a sleeping baby. She turned to Tyler. I wasn't expecting, but she didn't finish, as though she needed to. Her handsome Scott was thin, haggard, with sunken cheeks, sores on the arm that dangled over the bedside, and breathing with great difficulty, possibly having a nightmare, the way he let out little yelps like dreaming dogs do. I know, said Tyler. Chloe covered her face with her hands. God, what a mess I made of it! What a mess! What a terrible mess! Tyler pulled her to him, as he'd been aching to do all afternoon, and kissed the top of her head. It's not your fault. He led her to the kitchen and shut the door. They spoke in near whispers. Drink? Chloe nodded, and Tyler went about the preparations while he teased out the rest of her story. How did you end up in Seattle? Another film job, TV. Didn't last long, but I had nowhere else to go, so I stayed. Doing? She never got to answer. Hi, Chloe. They hadn't heard him nor seen him open the door, but there was Scott, supporting himself on the doorframe. Chloe ran to him, clung to him, and wept profusely against his chest. He took her back to the lovers' car park off the service road behind the hamburger joint north of Holloway, where they used to sit on the wooden bench and plan their futures, to tell her what he had decided to do now their futures had not turned out like they were supposed to. Scott was walking very slowly these days, with the help of a stick. Curbsides were a major problem because he couldn't look down without losing his balance. Chloe assisted him as best she could, trying to ignore the drivers who blasted their horns at him because of the time he was taking to cross the road. He couldn't tilt his head up either for the same reason, but there was nothing much to see if he had. No star or planet, not even the moon, had come out into the pitch-black sky to look down on their misery. The LA smog meant you couldn't watch the aeroplanes coming into land over the ocean or rising into the night on takeoff. It even smothered the pretty streetlights, so you couldn't see them 3 blocks away, let alone stretching all those miles to the airport. There were no cars parked in the dirt yard either, with their steamed-up windows and creaking springs. Scott and Chloe stood by the edge of the precipice, completely alone, in a place where they had come to be alone, yet felt abandoned. I'm dying, Chloe. It was an age before she could find something to say. At last she turned to him, and even though she realized the banality of it as the words fell from her mouth, she said, We're all dying, as if that were any consolation, or ever could be, and she instantly regretted speaking. But Scott looked fondly back at poor Chloe, as though her tired cliché was the greatest possible comfort anyone could have given him. No one but he knew then that his double vision had become so bad that he found it next to impossible to make the 2 images of whatever he saw slide into a single picture. The only way he could drive his truck was to keep one eye shut. He didn't tell them because he was afraid, and with good reason, they would take away his license. And it was a strain to look at anything for any length of time because the images drifted further and further apart. So he looked away from the 2 Chloes and let his eyes find rest in the indistinct smog, which was the same whether doubled up or in focus. She broke the long silence with, When I was a girl, a really little girl, it's the first memory I have of anything. I thought I had a guardian angel. She stared at the ground while she made her awkward confession. My mom told me. And when you go to sleep, Chloe, with your eyes tight shut, your guardian angel will watch over you and protect you all night long. My guardian angel? Your guardian angel. My gardening angel? Yes, my darling, your gardening angel. And I believed her. Isn't that silly? Every night I thought of him. He never had a face or any shape. He was just there, mine, my own angel. Even when I started to grow up, I always fell asleep thinking of him, watching over me, protecting me. Sometimes I used to let myself imagine the comforter was his wings stretched across me. She glanced at Scott and mistook his squinting for something very different, so she looked down again, quickly. And then when I met you, Scott, after I met you up there on the roof, all of a sudden, my guardian angel had a face. Scott clenched his jaw, staring or seeming to stare straight ahead of him. Now, maybe it wasn't just a squint she saw in his eyes. And even after all our fights, after we split and I went away and you got married every night, ever since we met, my guardian angel has had the same face. You know we can't get back together, said Scott, still staring straight ahead of him. I love you, Scott, that's all that matters, she continued, as though he hadn't uttered a word. I used to think it was the hardest thing to say, but it's the easiest. I love you. I always have. He turned towards her, and with all the strength remaining in his weak eyes, he forced the two Chloes to become one, saying, "And I've always loved you, Chloe. Of course I have. Christ, what did you think? Maybe not as much as I should, not as much as I do now. But I screwed up, didn't I?" He stared into the smog again. And now it's too late. Although she knew it was coming, she couldn't face it when it came. She gripped hold of his arms in denial as to the hopelessness of her pleading. "Please let me stay with you. I'm dying, Chloe, and every faculty I have is dying ahead of me. I can look after you. Please, Scott. Dear, darling Chloe, you've got to see I could never do that to you." "It isn't fair," she wept. "It's how things are, how the cards have fallen. Fallen for us. Together. No, for me. For me. For me. Dear God, I'm not going to let it be the way they fall for you." "There is no God." "Don't say that. Guardian angels and no God? I hate you." She clutched herself even tighter against the man she hated. "I know." He lifted up her head and mopped her cheeks with kisses. "You remember me telling you once, right here where we are on this very spot, that I was one of the lucky people?" She nodded and blinked her huge dark eyes at him. "I still am," he said, and let go his stick and steadied himself against his luck. She laid her head on his chest and he rocked her quietly back and forth, deep into the night. Heaven knows for how long, until she began to fall asleep. And they made their slow way home as the first light of day looked like it might be showing in the east. Sadly, sadly, the sun rose, and it has risen on many thousands of mornings since. But on that gray dawn, it rose on no sadder sight than Chloe and Scott locked in each other's arms, sharing a bed for the last time, the pillow on which both their heads lay close, damp with the secret tears of her gardening.